Tonight's shiur, Lila Nishmat Avi Morito, Ber Mer Ben Reuben, Halevi Imi Marati, Rachel Bad Harav Michael. And this week we have the privilege of reading Parshat Mishpatim. Also, we have the privilege of reading a Haftarah of Mishpatim, which we do not get to do that frequently. But we're not going to talk about the Haftarah of Mishpatim. But I would strongly recommend that before Shabbat, you look it over. It's a rather fascinating Haftarah in terms of the inability of people to get the message. That's all I'm going to say. Read it and you'll see why. Okay. Having said that, let's go. This week, as a parsha Mishpatim is very, very simply a parsha that is one of those parashot that is just basically one mitzvah right after the other until the last section, which we've talked about in the past, which deals with Matan Torah. But we are going to focus on the first part of the parsha, the first aliyah, but basically the last few psukim in the first aliyah, beginning with chapter 21, verse 12. We see a section of laws that seem to be somewhat related. We're not really going to talk that much about the relation because I really want to focus on the last two, but I wanted to learn the first few just to put this in context so you can see where the context of this halacha comes from. Okay, so the pasuk Yud Bet tells us, "Makei ish v'meit mot yumat." If you strike a person and they die, the striker, is put to death. It is capital punishment. Obviously, there are all sorts of evidentiary rules and court rules that have to be taken into account. But basically, the penalty for murder is death. Period. End of discussion. Now, Vashelo Tzada, however, if this was not first-degree murder, it was not a premeditated, planned murder. Vashelo Tzada, he didn't intend it. Velokimi Nali Yado, and God caused it to happen. So we have a concept of somebody who kills somebody accidentally, and he has to go to a place of refuge. Then we have a series of psukim that all deal with capital punishments, capital crimes. Yazid ish argopi arma. Obviously, this seems to be almost the same as verse 12. If a person will plan, premeditate against his fellow to kill him stealthily, even from the altar, even if he's a Kohen and he's in the middle of doing the avodah, you can remove him to execute him if he's been judged guilty. Somebody who strikes his father or his mother, most you must, is a capital offense, even if he doesn't kill them. Just striking your parents. Now the Gemara also says it has to be such a blow that draws blood. Okay, a wound. They go to ishu becharo, somebody who steals a person, a kidnapper, and sells the person he has kidnapped. V'nimtzavi yado, when he is found in his hand, mot yumat. Again, there are all sorts of legal things that are learned from each of these words. But notice this refrain of mot yumat, and finally makel el aviv imo mot yumat. And one who curses his father, his mother, is also a capital punishment, put to death. The reason I wanted to learn these few psukim before is just to understand that the psukim that we're going to focus on tonight, which are the next two psukim, Yud Chet and Yud Tet, all follow a whole sequence of laws that are dealing with capital punishment. Now, the Torah then continues, if two people will quarrel, and one man will strike his fellow, the Evan Oba Egrof, with a stone or an egrof. And I'm temporarily, we're not going to translate egrof, even though generally, all right, I'll tell you, general translation of egrof is fist. We're going to see that that's not the only available translation. I will tell you that the word egrof, which appears many times in the Talmud, only appears twice in all of Tanakh. Only appears twice. One of them is in our pasuk, and the other one is in the Haftarah of Yom Kippur, which it appears. But again, the point being, it's not a well-defined, clearly defined what exactly it means in biblical Hebrew, because it doesn't appear that many times in biblical Hebrew that we can develop from the context. And we're going to see why. That's why we're going to see the Parshanim are going to have a difference of what that means. But velo yamud, here in the case, he has struck somebody, has been struck, but he did not die. But v'nafal mishka, he becomes incapacitated. He has to be bedridden. Im yakum v'talech bachutz, if he shall arise and walk outside, al mishanto, on his, literally means his walking stick, v'nikah hamakeh, then the striker will be cleansed. In other words, he will not, again, remember, that's why I say this, because this is in the context of capital punishment. The only reason he doesn't get capital punishment is if the person recovers. Rakshiv Toyitain, he must pay for his time that he was not able to do his regular job. Rapoyi Rapay, and he must pay for any medications and treatments that he needs to heal him. Okay, so that's the psukim. We're going to try to focus on those two psukim. And we're not going to start with Rashi tonight. We're going to start first with Rashbam, because, as I said, Rashbam is going to go against the conventional wisdom of the word egrov. You got a question, or you're just raising your hand there? Go ahead.
If you strike your father or mother, he's put to death by strangulation.
Yes.
If he curses his father and mother.
Yes. The discussion, I'll take the discussion. Maurice's question that deals with the capital punishment. We have 4 different types of capital punishment under Torah law. Why is there a different type of capital punishment for striking one's parent versus cursing one's parents? I'll talk with that offline. If you want, we'll maybe later at the end. Okay, I apologize. I don't want to get into that. Okay. Now, Rashbam, as I said at the beginning, egrov, generally most seem to say the pshat seems to be a fist. However, Rashbam says no. Lefi pshat ketargumo, according to the simple explanation of egrov, is min even olevena. An egrov is some type of stone or brick, something solid, not your fist. Because it's comparing it to a stone. It must be something that is substantial. If we're talking about, because again, you hit somebody, you're not going to kill them with a hit, unless you're, some rather powerful person. That's what the pasuk. That's the context of the verses. We're talking about something that is thrown to hit somebody with, rather than hitting somebody from close range. V'chein, and similarly found b'torat kohanim b'nigei batim even eitzel choltzu ha'avanim b'zbilaveinim o b'tur musim. It means again some type of hard material. And he also quotes the other case where egrov appears in Tanakh, v'chein lahakot be'egrov resha, to strike with an egrov is evil. The Evan Gedola Sheyomit V'Yachboba. There again, he says the Navi is referring to a large stone that has the capability to be a lethal weapon. That he is now in our case. Again, in the case the Torah is discussing, it does not, even though it's a lethal weapon, it does not cause a fatal wound. That's the difference here. But Rashbam tells that egrov does not mean fist, because it couldn't, in the context, it can't mean fist, because a fist is not something you would generally associate with a lethal force. That's Rashbam's Aksha. Okay, Rashi. Rashi doesn't discuss the egrov yet. Rashi wants to understand what is the purpose of these 2 psukim in general, because it seems to be pretty straightforward. If the punishment for murdering somebody is death, punishment for somebody who doesn't get murdered shouldn't be death. Why do we need this? But Rashi says the purpose of this pasuk is strictly a tort pasuk, a damages pasuk that is here as part of Mishpatim, and he tells us that the reason is to tell us the bishanemer ayin tachat ayin, because later on in a different category of damages we are told that one has to pay the value of whatever the damage was. Lo lamadnu el demei evar. That only teaches the actual value of what was damaged. Avol shevet veripoy lo lamadnu. We did not learn halachot of Shevat that the attacker, when you damage somebody and cause them to be unable to work, that you have to pay for their time that they are unable to work, their salary, and you also have to pay for the doctor bills. Lola manu lakach nemer parshazu. That's the whole purpose of this parsha. It's not to tell us anything else, but there will be other things we'll learn from it. Rashi will as we'll see. V'nafal mishkav. What does it mean v'nafal mishkav? Not literally that he has to be bedridden, but kitargumo, the way Uncle is translated, v'yipol levutlan, that he l'choli shemavatlo mi malachto. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to literally be bedridden. It means any strike, if you strike anybody, cause him to be unable to work, he's not able to do his normal job, you have to pay for whatever it is that you caused him to lose in terms of work. Al Mishanta. What does it mean, Al Mishanta? If you will rise on his walking stick, doesn't mean literally his walking stick. It means Al Buryal Vikocho, that he will return to his full strength and normal. In other words, his normal routine. He will not have any long-term effects from this altercation that happened. That's Rashi's shot. Then Vinika Hamaket. Okay, now Rashi asks the question, obviously, would we have even thought that somebody who threw something at somebody maybe even had intent to kill him, but the fact that he didn't kill him, why should we kill him? Why would we think that? Ella lamnecha. This pasuk teaches a very important lesson. Shechov shimota, that we put him in prison. As long as the other person's life is hanging in the balance, we put him in prison. Until we see whether the person who was struck will be healed. We might have thought, oh, he didn't kill him, so he goes scot-free, and so this guy, we'll see what happens with this guy. The Rashi says, no, he has to be in prison. If the person is at a point where he's between life and death, we have to put this person in prison until it's clear that he will recover. That is exactly the intent of the verse. When the person is, we see that he's on the road to recover such that he's able to go out and walk about, as long as he's in bed, in critical condition or in possible critical condition, the person who struck him, again, obviously we're talking about a case where it was obviously intentional, and therefore he is imprisoned or held in a holding place until we determine what's going to happen. That's what Rashi says is the verse it teaches us. Okay, Rak Shivto. Now, what type of unemployment does he have to pay him? Bitul malachto machmar hacholi. The fact that he cannot go to work because of the illness. Im katayada or raglo. Let's say, for example, the wound he caused was he cut off his leg or he cut off his arm. Roin bitul malachto machmar hacholi kilu shomer kishuim. We only see the unemployment that he pays him is only based on a job that he can do after the fact, not whatever he was doing before the fact. So in other words, whatever job he had before the fact, that's a different calculation. How much he's now lost because he can no longer do his old job. That's not the unemployment we're talking about. When we say unemployment, we're talking about what he is now able to earn with the disability, if there is a permanent disability. What that would cause, what he would be able to earn with that. Because he can't do ordinary work that he could have done. Let's say he was a street cleaner before, and now because the guy did permanent damage to his arm, he can no longer do that job. Or let's say he was a tailor and he was sewing stuff, he can no longer do that job because now he's got permanent damage. We don't pay him based on that. That is a different calculation as to how much his earning capability has been diminished. That's a separate calculation. That's called nezek. That's called the actual damage that he has paid separately. This unemployment is what he would be able to earn now at his new, different earning capacity for the time that he's not able to do even that job. He's already paid him for his loss in earning capacity in a different category. You know, there are 5 different, if you go through, Gemara tells us there are 5 different categories of damages that a person has to pay when he damages somebody else. And one of them is loss of earning capacity, actual damage of loss of earning capacity. That's not what this is talking about. This is talking about how much he has known, even at his diminished earning capacity, how much he'd be able to earn during the period he's not able to even do that diminished job. Is obviously, as the title explains it, Yeshalim Sechar Harofet. He has to pay for whatever the doctor's costs are. Okay? And we're going to see a couple later on. We'll see a little also qualifications on that in terms of what is included or not included in that. Okay. Now, Ramban goes the way we would have expected. Say, Alashon Rabotenu. If we look at the way Chazal translate the word egrof hu hayad sheikabzu hatzbaot l'toch hakaf lakotba. Egrof is exactly as we've said. It's a fist. Close your hand up, boom, bang somebody. Kamo shomrim bali egrofim, those who are powerful, had strong power. Egrof, I think he has a whole bunch of these egrof, a whole bunch of cases in the Talmud where it mentions egrof. Okay, v'hizkir hakos of shnei hakaot. Now here the Torah says be'even o be'egrov, with either a stone or with his fist. So there are two different ways that the person did the damage. Achat kosher, one is with a hard implement, v'hiya even. The echad kala, v'hiya growth. One is a lighter damage done through the fist. Below tamikva al harov. The normal case when you hit somebody with your fist, it's not going to be a strong enough blow to kill them. However, Ramban says the reason the Torah gives two different ones that are very different in terms of the damage they can possibly cause, Lomar, to teach us, in both of these cases, the court has to do a calculation, do an estimate of the health of the person who was struck, and see if this person has to be kept in prison until we're sure that this person is going to recover. And if the person who was struck should die, you're going to call al nafsho. He hit him, even though he only hit him with his fist. When you hit him in a very, very vulnerable place, you could possibly kill him. You hit him, give him a hard enough blow to the head, it'll kill him, or to the heart, or whatever. Maybe he had whatever. Okay, even though we might have thought, well, you strike somebody with a fist, it's not a lethal weapon. You can't be, but no, if you strike the person in a place where it causes a lethal wound, fatal wound, then you are a murderer. But if he doesn't die, Yishalem Shevat Ripuy, then these two payments come into account that you have to pay. However, the Mechilta goes differently. Rabbi Nathan says the following: Hikish evenly egrov. The Torah, by saying be'even with a stone or be'egrov or with a fist, is comparing the two. Maha evan sheish bokdei lahamit. Just like the stone has to be a blow that's struck with the stone. The stone is thrown with enough force to kill him. In other words, if I hit you with ordinarily, and it's because you're weak and it hits somewhere, that's not necessarily capital punishment. However, alma egrof biyadua, af even biyadua. Just like an egrof, a fist, it's clear that you can generally see the fist coming. So to the stone. And it also has to be a fist. They can say, oh, he hit him with the fist. Witnesses have to be able to say he hit him with a fist. If there was a bunch of stones lying around and he picked one up, threw it at him, and then afterwards they couldn't identify which stone he used, then they can't necessarily create a capital punishment out of it because we don't have the actual weapon. Okay? Lomar, which teaches us if the stone gets mixed up with a bunch of other stones, we have to give the perpetrator, the attacker, the benefit of the doubt, and they only use the lightest stone. And if the lightest stone is not strong enough to cause a fatal wound, we have to let him go. We can't convict him of murder. Another say egrof regev afar, that egrof does not mean a brick, it does not mean a fist, it means a clod of earth. He picked up a bunch of a solid piece of earth and just threw it. Miloshin avshu prudo tachat magrefoteim. Okay, and then they give you the derivation of that. Hudat onklo shamabe kurmiza. He's scared Elagamken, and the reason that mentions all these different possibilities, Lomar ki gam beregev yumot imikov makom sheish bokdei lahamid. There are ways that you can pick up a clod of earth, throw it hard enough, and if it hits in the right place and at the right angle, it can kill somebody. V'zel lahavdil hacherev mehem she'ein tzorech omed k'mo shizkiru chachamim. And but the reason it mentions Evan and Egro is in certain cases, and we see this later in Sefer Dvarim and in Parshat Maseh, where we also talk about murder versus accidental murder, that when it comes to certain things, metal generally, and generally any type of sword, a knife, or any sharp metal implement, we don't say, oh, it's not strong enough to kill somebody. Any sharp metal implement, automatically, we don't calculate, yes, this has enough force to kill somebody. Whereas with stones, with pieces of earth, or other things, you have to estimate and evaluate. With the judges, one of the things they have to do is decide whether this item had the capability to murder somebody when you have a capital case. Okay. Continue. Ramban continues. Al Mishanto, on his walking stick. Al Boryovi Kolcholosh and Rashi. Okay, it means that he has to fully recover. The Amar of Avram, Ibn Ezra says, "Kitamo shelo yishain al acher kederach hacholim." What it means that when he has recovered enough, it means he's recovered enough to walk on his own, not having to be supported by someone else, because most people, even if they're very weak and they can walk with somebody else is supporting them. Rak al atzmo, only when he can walk on his own. That is when we release the perpetrator from prison and say, okay, this guy has recovered enough. He is healthy enough that he can walk on his own. That's the sign. However, my thought is that was Ibn Ezra, and he says, Ramban says, I think Mish anato kipshuto. His walking stick means his walking stick. Kimo ish mishanto biyodo merov yomim. Just like we have mishenet. Hakanel mishenet. The word mishenet is a walking stick. Normally, people walk with walking sticks. It's not a crutch. A walking stick. That's what we want. That's what people went out with. The yomer hakotuv, and what the pasuk means to say, according to Ramban, is ki kasher yichazek hamuka. When the person who was struck is strong enough, and he now resumes his normal routine of going outside, bishvakim, in the marketplace, along the streets, al mishanto, with his walking stick, kimishpat, hachalushim like anybody else who was healed, who's got better. He had a cold, he wasn't walking around outside. He got sick, he wasn't walking around outside. Now he's better, he's walking around outside. Then when he the Lomad, and this comes to teach us, Shafilu pasha benafsha umeid bechushato acharei kain lo yuman. That the pasuk comes to teach us once he is well enough to be outside in the normal routine, even if later he has a relapse and dies, the person does not get killed. The perpetrator, because once he's walked outside, he's been healed already. Doesn't matter. The Dira Kasu Bahova, and the pasuk is talking about a normal occurrence, a frequent occurrence. Because normally somebody who has received a wound in a fight and became bedridden or became home-ridden, they won't generally go outside until they're fully healed and they're already out of danger. Then they'll go back and resume going outside. And this is why the Torah writes that he has to walk outside. It's not enough that he's able to get around about his house with his walking stick. He has to be able to go out, and it means he resumes his everyday routine and normal routine. That's what it means according to Ramban. Uba Mechilta. Mechilta says the same, similar. If it says he gets up and walks about, I could say, hey, even if he walks up around his own house. Talmud Lomar Bachutz. The Torah adds the word Bachutz, meaning outside of his own house. Bachutz, however, if it only said he goes outside, I would understand even if he went around with support, with somebody carrying him, somebody supporting him. Talmud Lomar Im Yakum. He has to get up on his own, he has to walk on his own, but he also has to walk outside. Once he has gotten up from his sick bed and he is walking around on a regular basis outside, means also that when he goes back home, he's not running to bed because he's now exhausted and he's drained. Even though he may actually be weak, even though he's weak and he's walking on his walking stick, if he's well enough to be outside, that's already a sign. Now you have to understand, this was before you had to go to the doctor to all the clinics. This was back when the doctors made house calls. Okay, then the person who struck him is freed. And the general principle is all of this, is like Ramban said before, is the normal case, a frequent case. Vadinhu she'amdu l'chayim, and here the thing is they have to estimate. Court should estimate whether he will live or not. So when this altercation first happens, we immediately do an estimate to see if this person is expected to recover or not. And then if we say that he's not expected to recover, we obviously keep him in prison. But if we think he's expected to recover, unless something happens, he would generally be freed. Okay, if Yomar, and then the pasuk says, Rakshivto yitain v'rapo yirapeh. He has to pay for the time that he's not able to work, and rapo yirapeh, he has to pay for healing him. The low Amar, and it doesn't say shivto, his unemployment rufu ato yitain, and to heal him he has to give. Lahagid, to tell, this is to teach us that, by the way, when he has to pay the doctor bills, he doesn't give it to the person who was hurt. He pays the perpetrator pays the doctor directly to make them, to tell them to go heal him. The low yuchalit boa, and this is not something, if he decides I don't want any doctors, he can't say, oh, but you have to pay me what you would have paid the doctors. Can't come and claim in court. He can't, it's not a monetary award that he receives so much for doctor bills. It's if the doctors come and he uses medicine, then the one who struck him has to pay. But he cannot come into court and say, oh, I need so much and so much, I'll do whatever I want with the money. Rak Yerapabo, I'll call upon him. He is required to heal him, but only if the person wants to be healed. If he doesn't want to go to the doctor, you don't give him. It's not a monetary award that goes to the victim. It's a monetary award that goes to heal the victim. And that's what Ramban wants to tell us. Okay, Bechor short, very very short, very brief. That when he gets up, then the person is freed. Mimita, he is only freed from death penalty. It means he doesn't get the death penalty once the guy recovers. Obviously. Means if he would die as a direct result of this wound, ultimately, even if there's a long delay between, he would still be obligated in death. It would still be a capital case if ultimately he dies, even if there's a period of time. That's what Parshat wants to tell us. That it has nothing to do with how soon after you strike someone that they die. That's what he wants to understand from this. Okay. He should pay for his healing, pay for his unemployment and his healing. Perush, what does this mean? Even after he's healed enough to go outside, if he still can't work, he's healthy enough that he can go out, but he still not healthy enough to go to work yet. Oh, shadainu tzarich l'rofeg. His the striker's obligation for paying does not end when the person gets up and goes out the street. If he still needs more medical attention, if he still can't go to work, he still has to pay as long as he can't go to work and as long as he needs the medical attention as a direct result of this altercation. The Omer Rak, and that's what it says, Rak only, Yitbar al Pimash Kotav Rambam, that's what the Rambam explains, the following. There are two different ways. Misha'arim et haripui, v'chein hashevet omdin. So we do an estimate at the beginning of this process, we do an estimate of how much the medical bills should cost and how much the unemployment, how long he should be unemployed. And if he wants, he's allowed to take those two as a lump sum at the beginning, but not to him. Again, as I say, with the case of the doctor, goes to the doctor. With the case of the unemployment, he'd get it immediately. The erech hacholiyoto mashamdu eino mosif lo klum. In other words, he's allowed to say, the victim is allowed to say to the perpetrator, I want all the unemployment up front. The court said I'll be out of work for a year. I want you to pay me now the whole year's salary. And here's how much it is. Now, if it basically he's saying, I'm willing to take the risk. When only if, in other words, the perpetrator can't say, oh, you'll be out for a year, here's your year's salary. Only if the victim says, I want it. Because it's for his benefit. That's what Rambam says. In other words, if the victim says, pay me up front, whatever it is, then he's taking the gamble that he may be sick longer. That's what it says only. That's what he has to pay. Because there could be a potential where he would no longer have to pay for anything. That is, if the guy takes a lump sum payment up front, then it doesn't matter how long he's sick. He could be sick for the next 10 years, and they only thought he'd be sick for a year. Tough luck. You took the money up front. Below kitzvah, but if there's no agreement up front, yitin achit rapela chalutin. He has to continue paying until he's fully healed. Okay. Okay. One more thing, and this is an important one here. He's supposed to pay for the expenses of healing him. Another one of the Rambam also says the following: Amar lo hanizim. Psok v'chulei. That's me. If the victim says, you know what, they said, here's how much it's going to cost, pay me the money, I'll take care of how I get better. Don't worry about it. Ein shomim lo, Rambam says, no go. It says you have to pay for the medical expenses. Below Omar Omar Yiten Ki Omro B'Shifto Bis Hasmucha Shehayalo Lomar Shifto Fuato Yiten. Since it says that in terms of the time he's going to be unemployed, he's allowed to take it up front. That's one thing, but that's because that's something that he's due. But the medical bills, he can't say, "Oh, I'll do it myself," or "I'll find a cheaper doctor than you got." No, that's not okay. He can find a cheaper doctor, but it doesn't mean the difference balance goes to him. And lots of other halachot are learned from this whole law. Okay, now we're going to go into some more of the people who discuss this whole concept of the whole story. Let's go to Al-Shich. Okay, now, firstly, what is the context of this verse? After the Torah has told us that a person who strikes somebody and kills them, the gonev nefesh and kidnapping, all these other halachot that we talked about. But it comes to tell us, how does it come about that somebody would strike somebody and kill them? Where does that come from? How could you have such a scenario? That's what the Torah says. Shehu, and how does it happen? When people get into strife, they start arguing. Every murder generally starts with a quarrel somewhere along the line. That's exactly what Al-Shifan tells us. The Torah is telling us that you're going to end up murdering somebody because you can't get along together. You get into a quarrel, it's going to get worse and worse if you don't resolve it. The Sibra had Gatan, and that's the different stages it goes through. First, you start arguing, having an argument in words. It'll end up, we have no better growth. You'll throw something at the other guy eventually. And the first time, okay, maybe the first time you'll only throw it not hard enough to kill him. You only want to hurt him, you don't want to kill him. But that's all of this came about. Why? Because he got into a quarrel in the first place. Now, but he should not think just because he didn't kill him, that he's free in heaven for having had this quarrel in the first place and struck his friend. He can't excuse it by saying, well, it's his fault. He started it by saying something to me. Not an excuse in Shemayim. Maybe in terms of the legal courts, you may get by, but not. That's what Al says. Even if he gets up and pays him, and he's going to pay him all that he owes him. He still is not clear in God's eye. He still hurt this guy. Who asked him to hurt him? He's only paid for the fact that he was unemployed. That's all I gave. All I did was I made him whole again. But haven't asked him for forgiveness, haven't resolved the fight. But you haven't figured out how much, the fact that he was sick, he couldn't serve Hashem. Look what you've done. Look what you've caused. So what's going to happen? God's going to ask him, hey, it's your fault that this guy didn't do all those mitzvot he could have done. Instead, he was sick all this time. And in addition to healing his friend physically, He has to heal his own soul that he got into this quarrel in the first place. What he did was not appropriate. Here the other guy was talking to him and he attacked him. We know anybody who raises a hand to strike somebody else or throw something at somebody else is called a rasha. And that's why it says virapo yirape, 2 healings. He has to have 2 healings. He has to heal the guy, but then he has to heal himself from this bitterness that caused the fight in the first place. Very interesting comment by Alshif. I thought that was very good. Very interesting. Again, we have this double language of healing. You heal him, you can heal him. Why do I have to have this double language of rapo, yirapeh? Let him heal him. Nearly. Okay, so he says the following appears to me. The reason it says healing twice, we would have thought that there's no such thing as healing. Why? Because if Hashem allowed him to be harmed, then why should we be counteracting Hashem and trying to heal him? Since Hashem is the one who allowed him to be struck, how do we have permission to heal somebody? This not necessarily in this case, but he's taking the general case. If somebody is sick, who gives the doctor permission to heal him? Hashem's the doctor. Shmamina, and this is Gemara, we'll say we're going to see in a couple other cases, a couple other parshatim brings up. Shmamina yesh v'shut l'rapot. This pasuk of v'rapo yirapeh, this double language, comes to teach us that, by the way, medical practitioners are allowed under Torah law to practice, even though we might have thought otherwise. I'm going to see in a minute, Rabbeinu Bachaya will go a little bit further on this. Okay, we're going to see some more interesting things about the whole concept of healing in Jewish law and doctors. Okay, Rabbeinu Bachaya, Rapo Yirapeh. It's a very interesting comment. But kol refuah b'basar v'dam, wherever we find the word refuah, healing, in healing being performed by a human being, it's always a pay and not a fay. It's rapo yirapeh with a pay with the chain. Ripinu at Bavel lo nir pata. Again, similarly, we have healed Bavel, but it should not be healed. Avol b'Kadosh Baruch Hu, when it comes to Kadosh Baruch Hu healing someone, sometimes we have with, but sometimes sometimes it's with a fay, without the dugage. Kusha katuv rifa'eni, softer language. Rifa'eni Hashem ve'era fay, fa as opposed to pa, which is a harsher sound. Tiv harofeli shvorlev, but by Hashem also sometimes it's erpa, by Yerapeh Elokim et Avimelech. Sometimes it's with, sometimes not. Ki ani Hashem rof echa. What is that? That's a very nice drash he gives, but what does it teach us? The reason why healing that comes through human agency only comes about through pain and hard work. Who she is bold because the person who's in pain has to take hasam, he has to take some medication, hamashki hamar, or some bitter drink, bitter medicine to heal himself. When Hashem heals you, it comes about nachas, in ease. Ein sham tsar klal. There's no pain. So that's exactly why some places it's with a pay, some places with a fay. Okay, now the other thing, Mashamar Razal, this is the Gemara says in Bava Kama, V'rapo Yirapeh, that the 2 psukim of V'rapo Yirapeh are to teach us Mikan Shnita Reshut L'Rofei L'Rapot, that you're allowed to be a medical practitioner under Torah law, because without that I would have thought you can't. What type? Lo amru ela b'makesh shebachutz. A practitioner, according to Rabbeinu Bachai, is only allowed to practice medicine on external wounds, on external conditions. Any internal condition is not up to the doctor, but it's only up to Hashem, who is the healer of all flesh. That's Rabbeinu Bachai's perspective. We're going to see other perspectives. Told Yitzchak. Says the following. Hey, okay, again. When is a doctor allowed to heal? When it's a human-caused condition. But any conditions that come about because Hashem sends them, Hashem is the one who will heal them. That in his that the reason he didn't get healed was because he didn't ask Hashem. I went to the doctors. Okay, that's the first thing that told you says that the only kind of healing that the doctor is supposed to be healing is healing that is human caused. A pain and a wound that's caused by a human, a doctor is allowed to heal. But if it's something that Hashem caused, Hashem is the one who has to heal. Okay, again, a different perspective than Rebbeinu B'chaim, what is allowed and what is not allowed. However, the same thing that we had before, that again, the payment only does not go to the victim, it only goes to the doctor. And I'm going to close with Shir Ma'on, which is a very, very interesting thought. Okay. Shir Ma'on quotes again the Gemara in Baba Kama, says, that the doctor is allowed to practice medicine because the Torah specifically says, you're allowed to go to the doctor to heal. And many ask the following question. What does the doctor help? Does the doctor do anything? If Hashem has already determined that this person should be healed, what do I need the doctor for? And if Chas v'Shalom, Hashem has already decreed that he's not going to get better, what do I need the doctor? He's not going to help, right? Great question, right? If you think about the fact that Hashem is the one who's doing the healing, it's a great question. What do I need the doctor for? Either I'm going to get better or I'm not going to get better. That's up to Hashem. And that's a great question. V'yesh Lomar. He's going to quote a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that says the following. We've learned the following in Rosh Hashanah, okay? If there was a crop growing and it had something that made it get spoiled before Pesach, it means it was based on last year's judgment, because we know that crops are judged, grain crops are judged on Pesach, okay? But after Pesach, if it got, it's already from this year's Pesach, not last year's Pesach, okay? So therefore, Amar Rava said, that he understands from here that grain crops undergo judgment twice. Once last year is whether it's going to start out going good, and after this Pesach, before it's fully ripened, to see if it's going to continue. Okay, goes through two judgments, and Rashi explains in the Gemara there. One before it's planted or when it's being planted, and second is right before it gets harvested. Those are the two times crops are judged. Amar Abaye. So Abaye says the following based on that. Hilkach, therefore, when you see that the early crops are growing nicely, they've taken root nicely, they're coming up nicely, what should he do? He should immediately plant some more, okay? Because again, we know that certain crops ripen faster, so you should plant more crops before Pesach so that they will start ripening already before Pesach. Even the aflach, matzlach, since the other crops were doing well, it's a sign that all the crops were blessed with a good year. So you should plant quickly. Because we see that the fact that the earlier crops that we already planted at the beginning of the planting season are doing well means last year was a blessed year for crops. Plant now, quickly, before Pesach comes. So they'll already be good. So tonight's Gemara, it's a wonderful Gemara, right? Makes sense, saying like you can figure out whether your crops are going to be good from the earliest beginning, and plant more, or if they're no good, don't plant anymore. Okay? It seems very strange. I'm tricking Hashem. I can say, oh, last year was good, so I'll plant more last year. This year's going to be no good, so I won't plant this. How can we trick Hashem? If the next Pesach, I planted early season crops, they were doing great. So now it's already Shevat. I better plant some more quickly before Pesach, right? But in Pesach haba yigzor min hashemayim kerio onus al tfuah. If next year in this Pesach Hashem is going to say, hey, the crops aren't going to grow, mahu yili kadem lizroa. What is it going to help to plant? Halo harbe shluchim l'makom. Hashem has lots of different ways that He can cause the crops to either be good or no good. Hashem has plenty of ways to make it happen. L'kach nirali. So Shimon says the following: Halo kvar heshiv. Now he's going to bring another question, or another sort of trying to answer from a different angle. They asked Rabbi Yoshua, why did Hashem create the sun if He knew people were going to worship Him? He knew there were going to be sun worshippers. Why did He create the sun? The Heshim, and what did He answer? Olam Kaminahago No. God, Hashem created the world according to Teva, to have laws of nature. The sun rises, the sun sets. We have seasons, we have growth, we have crops, we have this. Vashotim, and those fools, Shekilkaluhu, who went and stupid and foolishly thought the sun was a god, Atidin Litin Adin. They will have to ultimately answer to God why they thought the sun was worshipful. The Yodua Shakadosh Baruch Hu Samchot Lateva. What he was really explaining is God set laws of nature. Hashem, in general, wants the world to run according to nature. That's the way Hashem set the world. We know that on rare occasions Hashem will intervene and change Teva, but that's the exception. That's not the rule. The normal rule is nature goes, and Hashem created nature. Hashem allows the world to operate in general under the rules of nature. So now he's going to go back. Now that he's gone these two tangents, now he's going to get back to the main discussion. Now we have this person who is sick. If a guy has a condition that's already been identified by the doctors, and they know if they go through this course of treatment, he normally gets healed. Okay, that's the norm. The norm is this guy who has this condition will be healed by this course of treatment. So kedei l'shanot hateva shelo yirapeh be'elu samim. So now to say that, that course of treatment won't work for this person. Hu masenes. That's already Hashem changing teva. Okay, so that only happens in avonotov gedolim kol kach shekadosh baruch hu ya'aseh nes neged hateva. Hainu shelo yi'ilu samir refuah. The only way that this normal course of treatment, this natural course of treatment won't work is if this person is such a great sinner that Hashem decides, I've had enough of him. It's time for him to go. But that means Hashem has to do a miracle to cause that to happen, because the natural course of treatment should heal him. So that's why, okay? And conversely, somebody who has been decreed that he should not be refuah. Alpines. He may have just enough merit to say, okay, Hashem's not going to do a miracle to change nature. And perhaps with the help of with my limited merit and Hashem's rachamim, I'll be able to be healed by going to the doctor, going through this natural course of treatment. Okay, in other words, the fact is, if I go a natural way, and the natural way says I should be healed, I should get better, then it's okay. Then I don't need so much merit because I'm not counteracting nature. And also, if that's the case, I won't lose all my merits. So I'll still have whatever I have in my spiritual bank account will still be there. I won't have used up all my spiritual bank account just to get better. The Zesha Amar Abaye, and that's what Abaye meant also in this case with the crops. If the natural thing is last year's crops are going to do well, put your crops into last year's crops so they'll naturally do well. Now if Pesach comes and Hashem says, well, this year's crops aren't going to do well, those are last year's crops. They're already decreed to do well. It would require a miracle to change their destiny. Hashem isn't going to do a miracle unless there's a real good reason for Hashem to change the course of nature. Okay, so that's exactly what the same thing in terms of refuah. That's exactly what the Shimon wants to say. that we have to understand that yes, we have an obligation, or we're allowed to go. Now we have an obligation. We're allowed to go to the doctor. We're allowed to seek natural cures for this whole reason. The whole reason being that Hashem generally operates according to nature, even though we know that, by the way, there's a whole. If you look when you go for a treatment, there's a whole tefillah you say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you hope that this doctor will be the appropriate shliach from Hashem to help you get over this illness, this ailment, whatever it is. And the same thing, why? And this is why, if you go through this whole thing, this is also why, in general, when somebody's not well, we make sure we try to say Tehillim on their behalf, or do other mitzvot on their behalf, so that Hashem will allow, whether it's allow nature to take its course, or no, on the other hand, if somebody is really ill and we're pleading with Hashem for a miracle, we know we need more help to perform a miracle. But again, the whole concept of healing, we see that the Torah takes a very, very interesting world of Parshanim, take a very, very interesting look at this whole concept of what we would call the medical profession. And therefore, I think it's very interesting for us to understand that, yes, Torah allows us, doesn't mean you have to, but the Torah gives us permission for medical practitioners to practice, for patients to seek out medical help. We shouldn't say that, like some fools that say, we'll just rely on Hashem. Now, I'm not saying that relying on Hashem is good. That's good. But Hashem has also given us the natural way to handle these things, so that we hope and pray that we shouldn't be sick, we shouldn't need all these, and Hashem should watch over all of us, all of Am Yisrael, and send us all of His blessings. But I thought it was very interesting concept that sort of derived, sort of on the side. This, by the way, is not this whole concept of refuah and all of these things that we come in after this. Really is not the main thrust of this pasuk. If we go back to our original Rashi that we started with, the main thrust of this pasuk is simply a case of civil law, that a person who causes damage to someone else has to make them whole monetarily and financially for the damage that they've caused. And that's another thing that we also need to take into account when we are going about our days, trying to avoid damaging others and harming others. That's another very important aspect that we learn from this whole parsha of Mishpatim, which deals, as I said, with lots of laws of civil law as well as criminal law also. So thank you all. Have a good. At this point, I open up for questions, comments, and feedback. Anybody? Okay. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the week.